Thanks for asking me to speak, Lauren Astriosity. And I'm surprised it's such a big crowd tonight. I thought everybody would probably be watching the Seahawks game, but I'm glad to see people show up. And Andre, thank you for speaking and being available for service, especially last minute. I really appreciate your insights and talk. As for me, my sobriety date is June 14th, 2011. I have a sponsor and I'm currently looking for a new home group. And I'm gonna start off with what it was like early on, where like for a long time I didn't think my childhood made a big difference in my alcoholism and how things happened. But looking back on things and doing a lot of internal work and therapy and a lot of other um, insights over the years, I've realized like, oh shit, maybe my childhood did have an effect on me. And I was adopted. As a 6 month old. So I didn't know, I haven't really known any other family. My adopted family is my family. But I recognize that because of a lot of detachment and attachment disorder based challenges that I always seek validation from other people because that's how I learned early on how to um, survive. I didn't relate with a lot of people because I felt so detached. And growing up in Mid Coast, Maine, if anybody knows Mid Coast, Maine, it's not very diverse. And as a brown person in Mid Coast, Maine, I didn't realize at the time that it was as challenging as it was, but looking back on it, I can understand like, hey, I felt separate from a lot of other people, and I feel like that's a lot of what my alcoholism was based on. Not It's not solely because of my adoption or my attachment issues or all that, but it is a factor in what made me feel different and separated from the people around me. And to be able to um, get through that, I would lie and present myself a certain way. I got good at being able to present well, um, but not be able to um, feel connected at the same time. And that, as I continued on throughout my childhood and early on, like I really, that started to become more and more evident. And when drugs and alcohol was introduced at 13 or 14, I realized like, hey, I feel better when I have a substance in me, and I took to it pretty fast. Like my first booze experience was actually pretty bougie, because I had Grey Goose and like this imported beer that my dad had kind of forgotten about. That I stole and drank with a bunch of my buddies, and we ended up getting drunk and having a lot of fun. But I started off kind of classy, but then from that point forward, it was just whatever I could get my hands on. And then other substances were mixed in with that um, to make to give me the feeling of like, oh, I can do this. I can feel okay in myself when I have these these substances, these things in me. I was more confident. My fear of being accepted was pushed to the side. I stopped um, worrying about the little things in my life and was able to just relax. And that was the first time in my life I think I felt that. But then would come the consequences, like many of us. doing shitty things to people, having run into the law, having things happen to me, that if I was sober, I would be mortified of doing. Like I was a different person, but it gave me that relief to be like, okay, maybe I can get through this. And being able to have that quick solution was really important to me. Was more accepted for a while before it got really bad. Before I started being shitty to people, like I got more friends. I was able to do a lot more things. My parents had divorced for a number of years at that point, and like I could play them off of each other and like get my own way because they didn't really communicate at that time. And when I when I was 16, I ended up in the hospital. Um, on Christmas Eve, I had um, my first hospital stint, and I ended up going into um, outpatient treatment for a while, but that still never really convinced me. I might have been, I wasn't even really, I can't even say I was really sober because I was still smoking, but I had at least a brief hiatus from drinking, which was my main source of fuel at that time. And then as soon as that was over, I was just right off where I was from the beginning. But as my alcoholism progressed, it got worse and worse. I used more dangerous substances. I drank more. I pushed people away. I had more. Um, I had more people that were concerned about me. I isolated myself from the people that cared about me even more, and I found myself like feeling empty. And for a couple of years, I tried other solutions to be able to like manage that. I tried, um, I tried Buddhist meditation for a while. I found a mentor. I did a lot of the things they talk about in the book, like staying off for a couple months, only drinking beer, only doing a certain substance for a brief period of time so that I felt sober, regimenting myself and doing all sorts of things. Um, and there were times when I was doing better than not, but I inevitably fell back into things and still had this emptiness and detachment from everybody else that still pervaded what I really, how I really felt. And being able to I was able to even recognize that in a lot of ways. And I'll say my last year before I um, got sober was actually probably one of my better years. I had turned 21 and I made this vow to do a lot better. And I went off to school and was pretty successful there. I had limited my drinking. I had taken more focus on my academics. I was lucky to be pretty smart and able to get through school without having to put in a lot of effort. Like even early on in college, I was able to get through without having to struggle too hard, even though I was still very much an alcoholic. Um, and I was fortunate for that, but it also gave me more time to like say, oh, I've got all these things. Like I wouldn't, if I was an alcoholic, I wouldn't be able to do school well, or I wouldn't be able to um, buy my own car or do all these certain like life milestone things that I was able to do at the time. But what the biggest thing for me was this separation from how I presented myself and how I really felt. And I looked myself in the mirror every morning, and I had those black bags under my eyes. And like I would look at myself and say, what the F am I doing? Like really stare at myself and say, what am I doing right here? And like I was too proud to, well, I wouldn't say I was too proud to like take care of myself in that way, but I felt like I couldn't do that for whatever reason. And I just tread that line for a long period of time, and I hated myself for it. And I ended up, I skipped a little piece of my story. I had separated from my family for a little while and found myself um, even lonelier as I pushed more people away. But I hit another mini bottom and came back home for the first time in like 2 years. And that's where everything popped back up. I had about a month there until I moved back for a job that I had that I had gotten at my college town, and I I found myself in the same place as I did when I was in the heart of it. There, I was drinking every day. Um, I was really depressed. I was living between my mom's house and my car half the time because I could only show up at my mom's house when I was sober, um, and that wasn't very often. So I slept in my car a lot at that time, um, and I just felt it all come out at that time. And I found myself in the hospital again, which I probably should have ended up in the hospital more, but like no one cared about me at that point. I wouldn't say that, but like I wasn't surrounding myself with people that would understand like how bad my alcoholism was, and I got um, sent to the hospital again because I passed out on my mom's living room floor, um, and she found me there and went to the psychiatric unit at our local hospital, um, and from that point forward, I was sober, but that wasn't really because of me at that time. I got into that psychiatric unit um, and did what I always did, like presented very well. I read the big book in like 2 days, I think, because I was in the psych unit, so there wasn't much else to do. So I spent a lot of time reading it, understanding it, and my conclusion was, oh, I don't need this. I can get sober on my own, which, um, which I actually wanted. I guess I kind of wanted sobriety at that point, but I didn't want it to be forced to go to these meetings or to these things. I wanted to do it on my own. But thankfully, both my family and the treatment team there didn't agree with me, which surprise, surprise. I wasn't able to convince them that I was going to be able to do it on my own, and I went to a treatment center out here in Washington, and um, and was able to meet some people around my age that were trying to do the same thing. I went to a treatment center out in Port Townsend, and was based around 16 to 25-year-old young men, which was good for me, but I still was in that mode of, oh, if I present well, I would be fine. Um, and I aced treatment. I did really well in treatment, whereby just like I was, like I said, I was pretty smart and I knew what I needed to say. But I remember one night, one of the counselors in our nightly group meeting called me out like, hey, you're saying the right thing, but how do you actually feel? And I lied and said, oh, I'm great. I'm doing awesome. But at that time, I still had that detachment and separation from like the people around me. Like I thought I could do this on my own. And I had this like 2-year plan to get through treatment and do what I need to do and present how I need to present and then go back out drinking. That was my plan. But as time went on and I went out of that treatment center into a halfway house and went through the next steps, I started to realize like, hey, I don't really want to feel like this anymore because I still had that emptiness inside me and I didn't really want sobriety yet. And like I said, I was on paper, I was doing the right thing. I had a sponsor. I even did like this mega fourth step that took us like 6 or 7 hours to go through. And like, God bless my sponsor. I thought was I think I confused resentment with like annoyances and little things. So I put literally everything I was annoyed by, including like the hyenas from The Lion King, on my footstone. And I actually don't like those lions, but that's beside the point. I did this mega fourth step and like I said, I was doing the right things to present well, but like I still wasn't feeling it at this time. And once I was out of treatment in my halfway house and sent over to Seattle actually for to stay at the sober house, I was going to meetings and again doing the right thing and having service positions. But my sponsor at the time had had a lot of health issues and he wasn't super available. And even when he was, like, all we would do was kind of chat through things. And he was very patient with me, but I realized, like, I could take advantage of that and not really, like, fully dive back into the steps once I um, once I realized like he was going through a lot of things um and there was one night when he was in the hospital actually and I was here in Seattle and had just been fired from a job that I didn't really like, but I found myself on Third and Union at the bus station there, wondering whether I should go drink, whether I should score something from the people on Third Avenue, or um, what what I was going to do next. And thankfully, I took long enough for it to raise enough alarm for my sober house manager to give me a call, pick me up, talk me out through things, and get through like the difficulties that I was going through at that time. And that soon after that, I became more willing, and my sponsor got healthier after that, which was also helpful. But I started to believe that was the biggest thing. I started to believe like, hey, maybe things could be better if I actually gave this a shot. And I got involved with a couple different groups here. Um, did the steps again in earnest and got the support that I needed to be able to get through that first year of sobriety. And I made a decision that could have gone really, really bad at thinking back on it, but I made the decision to go back to my old college town where I had hit my bottom because logistically it made more sense for me to go back and I spent 2 years there. But thankfully at that time, like I said, I had found the willingness and found the hope in this program that I really felt like I could go back and handle that. And I got involved in service there for the first time, general service there. And I, like a lot of us who end up in service, I was at their business meeting, this young people's business meeting, and um, when it came time to nominate new positions, I was the only one who could have been available for the GSR position. So I was able to get connected with a lot of people around New England at that time, back in Vermont. And I had the chance to really like explore like what it was like to be young in sobriety and motivated to make a difference for other people in this program. I traveled all around Vermont and Massachusetts and parts of New Hampshire to different meetings, to outreach things, and I went to my first conference in Burlington, Vermont, and we slid down. They had to shut down all the roads in Vermont because we got like 10, 12 inches of snow, so all the roads were closed. So you could literally sled down the main hill in Burlington, Vermont, and it was fucking awesome. I'll tell you that. But I found the joy in things, and at that point, like I didn't relate with a lot of people my age at that point either, which was interesting. But I realized like, oh, we're all trying to go through the same thing. Like we're all just trying to do the best that we can, and I really found a new life in that kind of environment. And when I finished school, I came back here and was able to like continue that. And I'll say that we were really fortunate at that time because a lot of us had moved into the Seattle area from outside of Seattle and were motivated to um, create more spaces for young people in AA to be a part of. And I, we had a great group of people who had both the time, the energy, the motivation, and eventually the skill to do a lot of like pretty awesome things in the program. Um, Create a conference, create a service area, service position, do all these little things. Like it was, we were blessed to have like that time together. Um, and it really kept me solid for a lot of years. And in the middle of that, uh, I still found myself needing a little bit more. And that's one thing I've recognized over the years. It's like, hey, like I'm gonna grow up, but two, I'm gonna have a lot of plateaus and reasons or need for growth throughout my lifetime. And they show up periodically in different intensities. But like I found myself towards the end of that run of like a lot of service needing a little bit more. And I found myself wanting to do something a little bit different. So I went back to school to study mental health counseling um, and figure out like, hey, maybe I can be of service in other ways now. And that was another big turning point for me because I went through school and also recognized I didn't agree with some of the things in the program. Some of the mantras, some of the like sayings that we have, I didn't quite believe in. But for me, I was always someone who wanted to push for change and willingness to grow within um, whatever community I'm a part of. I want to be impactful in how we make things work within whatever organization. And I never really like hated the program, but I just didn't really associate a lot with that. And then I also recognized like, hey, I hadn't, to that point at 30 years old, I hadn't done a lot of work on the adoption stuff, like I had talked about earlier. Like I realized that like there was a lot of like attachment disorder based trauma that I hadn't addressed in the 10 years I had been sober to that point. And I I realized like, hey, I need to do some work on this. So um, in a lot of ways, I ended up like finding a similar, not a similar program, but I found like a organization that did a lot of work that I was very used to in supporting adoptees, particularly Guatemalan adoptees. And because I had so much experience in service, it was actually a pretty good fit for me to transition over to that. And that I did that for a couple of years and really dive deep in my therapy and um, in my um, in my service work in that um, organization to be able to like really start to feel whole again. And I also, and I wouldn't suggest this for many people in the program, but I needed that space away from the program because I felt as if my identity was totally based around just being sober, and I needed to figure out a lot of things about myself. Um, but I consulted with the sponsor at the time, my old sponsor, and a lot of people in my life to make sure I had a plan around that. Um, to be able to step away and say like, hey, maybe I need to discover some other things about myself. And that was a lot of um, a lot of time to process what I needed to. And I came back after a couple of years of not going to many meetings and not having a home group. I came back a couple of years ago, and like I still don't. I believe the organization of AA as a whole can grow, and I definitely want to be a part of that. But I have a lot of other things in my life that, like, I'm motivated to be a part of. So I haven't fully gotten back in the program. Like I said, I don't have a home group right now, but I recently have had some more time because I'm looking for some new work and I have some time to go back into meetings. Like I'm going back, I'm trying to find a home group. I'm making things more consistent again, being able to show up for people and be recognized. Because I think for a couple of years after um, the adoption organization work was done, like I felt kind of aimless outside of my work, and um, and now I'm in the middle of figuring out what's next in a lot of ways. My family has gotten bigger. I met my niece, my first niece, in November, which was really awesome to see. My brother's now a father, which is awesome, and our first child of this generation. And like I'm thinking whether I should be back close to my family as my parents age because I've repaired a lot of things with them. Um, I'm thinking about my job. I said my long-term future, but without AA, I wouldn't be able to like even start that process. Like I would, I don't know what my life would be like if I had continued drinking. It doesn't particularly appeal to me, but I I wouldn't have the opportunities now to do what I need to do. And when I was asked to speak, I was a little bit hesitant because, like I said, I was still in the middle of trying to find some things and figure out um, what I was doing next. But I can say that I have a general belief that things will be all right. And if I surround myself by people that are aware of what I am going through, I'll be all right. But I have some structure and I have things in my life that I can look forward to. And without the program, I definitely wouldn't have that. So I really appreciate you for asking me to speak, and really, it's really awesome to be able to share my story again. Thank you.
So, Will, thank you so much.